Are you ready to spend your weekend with Friedkin?
Is everyone ready to spend your weekend at Friedkins? Oh my God, that was killer. Howdy, everybody.
For the last time.
Yeah, this is it on a Sunday night.
This is it. Yeah. How
So
you doing out there, Uncle Bill?
I'm doing killer, man. I'm still waiting though. We're still waiting on another member
We
to
got a
show up.
special guest that's supposed to be here tonight, but we'll see if they show up.
But this is the finale of the popular and much talked about series Weekend at Friedkins. And what better way to end this than with probably his most famous and infamous film, The Exorcist, and a film that you and I grew up watching, and I had no fucking clue that he had anything at all to do with it. Blue Chips.
It is kind of odd, yeah, because I'd seen this movie in the theaters when it came out, but 14-year-old creepy Kentuckian had no clue. He didn't really follow directors or anything like that at that point in time. So how would I have known the same guy made what some called the scariest horror movie of all time? But it's almost like the Mega Powers boys. They're getting together and they're going to explode tonight, all over the place, all over your face.
He made the scariest movie of all time, and then a movie with Penny Hardaway and Shaq, which I would love, because that guy just does not strike me as somebody that like is in that world at all. Like I would love to see the behind the scenes shit from Blue Chips, like just how that all went.
Shaq is like, "Hey Bill, what's going on, bro?
Yeah.
Nice to meet you, bro. I'm a big fan of cruising."
Wouldn't it be killer if he was like a huge fan? He's like, buddy, to live and die in L.A. was your best work. It's kind of like Sonny Landham. Hello, Bill.
But I think there's a lot of very interesting aspects to Blue Chips, and it's a movie that nobody really talks about. I think it's finally getting a Blu-ray release, or maybe it did recently, but I don't own it. Luckily, we had a digital copy of it, thanks to Voodoo. But a very interesting time, and we're definitely going to talk about that because there was a lot of things I was into as a young kid. This was a weird time frame, like 94, 95 era. I kind of was not into horror, was not into even wrestling that much, but I was big into college basketball and NBA and stuff like that. So I actually collected basketball cards and shit. I was that hardcore into it at that age. So, I mean, it takes me back to a different place and time. The singing Blue Jays sung about it. I want to go back there.
If only for a
day.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I don't know if anybody remembers this period of time if you were like a teenager around the early to mid 90s. Everybody was collecting basketball cards and shit like that. Like everybody was into, watching basketball. Basketball was huge at that point in time. Uh-oh.
You want to give him a big introduction?
Yeah, I mean, as I say, he's one of the greatest co-hosts in the history of Dead Pit. He's the real deal. Jay Real. Bring his ass in here. Come on.
Oh, you want me to bring him?
Bring him in here.
Okay. Welcome aboard.
Sorry, I'm late. I got the message from Wes saying 9:00, but I was thinking 9:00 my time, and he meant 9:00 your time. So
how dare you be late to this, Jay? This grand finale.
It's a standard time, baby.
What are y'all talking about first?
We haven't really even started. We were just going through
No.
like the introductions, really.
Oh, okay. Well, I'll leave you to it.
But I don't know, like, Jay, have you seen Blue Chips?
Saw it yesterday
Oh, okay.
for the first time.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I guess we should talk about Blue Chips first because let's be honest, this is a
that's
horror
what I was going to
podcast.
suggest. Let's get Blue Chips out of the way first.
And because oddly enough, and I don't know if people realize this, since 2005 we started the show, we have never given The Exorcist a proper review on the show ever, which is
bizarre.
very weird. Yeah.
So, I watched this one probably about 2 weeks ago, and it was one of those ones though where when I rewatched it, I was like, I don't need to watch this anymore. Like, I remember this movie. Like, I saw it so many times when I was growing up. Like, I remembered almost everything about it before it even happened in the movie, except the ending. Like, I didn't remember the ending. And just like, it just fucking ends like that, But Blue Chips is the story of Nick Nolte as a basketball coach. He's coaching a college team. And if somebody remembers the name of that team, tell me now, because I do not remember that.
Western University, I think.
Just Western, yeah.
They had a weird mascot. I can't remember the mascot. Goldfish or something like that. Somebody in the chat.
A goldfish would be awesome.
The Western University Goldfish.
So he's had a bad last season.
The Dolphins. There we go. It was a fish of some sort.
Yeah, the goldfish. He had a bad last season, and like he's trying to put together a semi-decent team for the next year. And really what it's about, the beginning of it is like he wants to do everything by the books. He wants to recruit these people, like these kids, like exactly, how you're supposed to. But
he ends up get into any payola and all that crap.
Right. He ends up finding out you really can't do that and like win. And I think that's the same thing Rick Pitino found out too. Like, that's why we had so many good teams. He was like, "Oh,
Rick
yeah."
Pitino is in this movie, by the way.
He is, yeah. But he just starts like he starts to recruit these kids, and I was checking this out, man, because I was like, you got Penny Hardaway as one of the recruits. You got Shaq as one of the recruits. And then you got this just random white guy. And I was like, I looked him up. I was like, is this guy a basketball player? Or he wasn't a basketball, like not on a professional level or anything like that.
No, he was, he played for the University of Indiana. And he was a collegiate player, kind of successful. And I think he played overseas a little bit, but he never did get drafted to the NBA. But this was right around the same time he was finishing up his college. So at that point in time, they didn't know.
Well, this was 1994, wasn't it?
Yeah.
The year it come out.
It was released in 94. I think they filmed it in 93. I did have that guy's name here.
Yeah, because I looked him up. He never was in anything else again. He was never like in a movie or anything. And I'm guessing
Matt Nover. He played Ricky Rowe in the movie. And I kind of knew even at the time, but I wasn't familiar with him, that he had to be a basketball player because he was just as big as these other guys. And he was not a very good actor. You can tell. Like, but yeah, I mean, you and I must have had the same idea. We looked him up. He did play and was successful in Indiana in the 90s. I think the last great Indiana team they had for a long while there. He was on it.
But, he's the only one that really didn't fit to me. Like, it just seemed like, I don't know, like, I didn't know who he was. I hadn't heard of him. I didn't think I'd heard of him when I was a kid or anything. And, like, he was, like you said, a horrible actor, so it just kind of took you out of the...
Well, and I was actually, frankly, surprised about how good Shaquille O'Neal was. I mean, he was...
Yeah, he was...
Real natural acting style, very easygoing and just, he was actually pretty good.
He was very likable in that movie.
Yeah.
I thought...
Yeah, he was given the biggest part in the movie, too, of course. Penny Hardaway, oddly enough, like this was before he become, I think he played for Memphis I think it was Memphis. And he was good in college and everything, but his breakout wasn't until he was with oddly enough, Shaq in Orlando. And at this point in time, here's what's funny: when they were filming this movie, they were not teammates at all. So they, what are the odds that those guys got on the same NBA team? I think
Yeah.
this was before Penny got drafted.
Yeah, like they had no connection up until that point. Like, they would be on the Magic later and everything. But yeah, I thought that was bizarre too. You can tell though, like that this is a Friedkin movie. I really wasn't like paying attention when I was a kid or anything, or know anything about him, but because like there's this kind of seedy underbelly to everything that goes on in this movie, which in this one it takes the form of that guy. What's his name? Happy, yeah, who's like a booster. He's like a sports booster, and
JT Walsh is the actor's
JT
name,
Walsh,
and that guy, he passed away like a long, long time ago.
He's so good in Sling Blade. That's my favorite performance of his is in Sling Blade.
He was also in Breakdown with Kurt Russell. Do you remember him in that?
He's just great in any kind of like villain sleazebag kind of like role like that, and he was great in this too. And so this whole time, like this kind of scandal is following Nick Nolte, his character, and Al Bundy, Ed O'Neill, is like a reporter who's caught him up in it, and he's like, every time he does a press conference, he talks about this old scandal and would you comment on it, and he just doesn't believe that it ever happened or that he did anything like nefarious happened.
It was specifically, I believe it was a what they call it, shaving the point
shaving, yeah,
point shaving, yeah, and he was unaware that had happened until he was shown videotape of it. JT Walsh points out that this has happened, kind of threatening him.
Yeah.
Right. You either play the game, or I'm going to reveal this, or I'm going to,
JT, that character though, like, here's the thing with the thing with Friedkin was too, like whatever movie he did, he always like went into the world of like whatever he was doing a movie about. So I know from reading a bunch of stuff about this movie that he was around like a bunch of college basketball coaches and programs and things like that. And so was Nick Nolte, who kind of studied all that stuff around the time of this movie. So, I mean, I'm sure that guy exists, that's just a kind of a characterization of a real person, that JT Walsh and those kind of boosters and stuff like that. And so they want him to do like what everybody else is doing, which is like buy these players and basically set up like a super team so that they can win again and the school will make more money. But up until that point, Nolte hasn't really gone for that. And that's kind of where things like...
Well, I think it's the interesting thing about this movie too is, looking back at it now, is it's a basketball movie, but most of the movie is set around off season. So there's really no games aside from the beginning and the very end of the movie. You have the last game of the season at the beginning and the first game of the season at the end, which is it's totally different than other basketball movies in that regard too. I think that the most memorable thing about this movie is Nick Nolte's performance in this.
There's a lot of screaming, God damn it, I'm tired of this goddamn team, I'm tired of this, I'm tired of God damn it, everything's God damn it.
And he's just so into it, and I'm pretty sure they're basing it on Bobby Knight, some of the shit that he was doing around that time. But he was kind of upping it a little bit, even with Bobby Knight. And his just hardcore, he was totally believable as a college basketball coach in this.
Yeah, that's one of the big parts about this movie. Is like, not for a second did I believe that he wasn't a basketball coach, because he's just high intensity, like screaming like the whole time, and just
that's something Nick Nolte could always do.
Oh yeah, he's great at that. And the beginning scene in the movie is basically just him screaming at his team, walking out, coming back in and screaming, walking back out, coming back, which is like Bobby Knight. I mean, you could just see Bobby Knight doing it.
And he doesn't just scream at the players; he goes out and screams at the reporters. And he's he's screaming at everybody.
So I mean,
oh, go ahead.
Go
I was just gonna say, as a kid though, watching this, like for some reason I didn't remember the language at all. It'd been many years since I'd seen this. I was just so enthralled that one of my favorite basketball players, Shaquille O'Neal, was in a big movie at the movie theater, right? So when they're introducing these guys, one by one, they're like Nolte's going around and recruiting these guys and looking at these guys. So each one of them has almost like a gimmick, right? So Penny Hardaway's character is pretty much just a straight-laced Chicago. I think he's based in Chicago. High school basketball player. It's highly recruited, but his mom is out to definitely wants a new house and a new job and everything. Wants some perks along with it.
Yeah.
And the the Ricky Rowe character, I think was his name. He's like corn-fed from Indiana. They go and visit. I think the coach visits Larry Bird's because he's from French Lick, Indiana, as well.
I like the idea, by the way, that you could just drive up and see fucking Larry Bird shooting ball on the side of the road. I was like,
dude, I've actually heard that. Well, I don't know about it anymore because he's kind of out of the limelight, but he always lived in French Lick, Indiana, and he would just kind of come and go. Like I have actually heard that's not far from the truth.
yeah, but I mean, I'm fairly certain that Larry Bird's got a ball goal at his house. Like, I don't think he needs to go down to some park and just shoot baskets by himself.
He might. He's old school, man. Old school.
That's so cool. He just pulls up on him like, hey, what you doing?
Neon Boudreaux was Shaq's character, and he was kind of like, I don't think he finished high school. He was, not the smartest. And then they find him deep in the bayou in Louisiana, boys. He's like in this garage top 3-on-3 basketball
hitting the
top
nets
game.
Yeah.
Yeah. He hasn't been discovered at all. Nobody knows who he is, but he's like the big star out of the three. They always
fucking reminds me that part reminds me of like in No Holds Barred where they're wrestling and all them like dives and stuff.
Well, and I like
find him.
I like the aspect that Shaq he plays stupid. He plays like he has his, he was the SATs or whatever the score, he had real low, just like basement level score. But he's a genius. He's just lying about it because he's not sure he wants to go to college. He wants to play, college basketball yet,
Yeah.
Once he makes that decision and he takes the score and then he scores this outrageous score, high score. But he's playing dumb. He's not, but he plays dumb.
Right, but that's his gimmick at the get-go. That's why he couldn't go to college and stuff.
Right.
Like that's what they tried to say. And then, there's, I guess, a group of other guys like scouts that are they're all trying to get the same guys. So and he feels stressed that, he had a losing season, I think, for the first time last season. So to get these guys, he's going to have to bend the rules a little bit.
Now that part of it though, I thought that came too like abruptly for me. In terms of like in 1 minute, literally like in 1 minute, Nick Nolte is like, Ricky comes in, he sits down, and he's like, so yeah, I want to play here. Everything's nice, but I'm gonna need about $30,000. And Nick Nolte's like, get the hell out of here, you son of a bitch! Like, and then like literally the next scene, he's like talking
he's
to
got a stack of bills. He's
he's talking to the boosters, and he's like, yeah, let's go ahead and buy these guys all this shit.
Yeah.
It's like he just changes for no real decipherable reason, like really quickly. Like I felt like they should have maybe paced it out more, where they got their ass kicked a couple times or something happened, where he realized they couldn't win, and then like they decided to do that. But it just kind of happens. Like he buys the guy's dad, Ricky's dad, a tractor. He buys Shaq like a sports
Lexus.
car. Yeah, Lexus. And then he buys Penny Hardaway's mom a house and all this shit. So the boosters, all come in and they all set it up to where all these kids are bought and paid for. And yeah, I mean, really, like, that's the big part of the movie. And then, like, directly right after that, there's this one kid. Do you remember his name? Anybody? The kid that was on the team
Tony.
before Tony. Yeah, thank you, Tony.
He
who
was
had-
not a basketball player. He was actually an actor, I think.
Oh,
I
yeah, that
looked
makes
him up.
sense.
Yeah.
So he had been the only good player on the last team before they brought all these guys in, and like really one that like Nick Nolte was trying to help and was high on and all this. So right around this time, he finds out that that he, shaved points the last season in this one particular game, and so it just destroys all of like his belief. I think in the process and all that too.
Yeah, and they kind of want to go back and look and say, how long has this shit been going on? We haven't even known about it. And it really gets to him. I think his ex-wife, he and his ex-wife have like an odd relationship there. And she's kind of pissed at him, can't believe that he did this. He's kind of upset at himself. And, they have the big opening game against Indiana, Bobby Knight.
Yeah.
And I never knew that Bobby Hurley played for Indiana, by the way. Did you notice that?
You didn't know that? Bobby Hurley.
But, yeah, I
the whole
particularly
thing?
remember a game on my 12th birthday, that motherfucker.
Yeah, that guy's a piece of shit. But didn't Bobby Hurley get into a really bad car accident or something when he was in college, and then he kind of had to drop out or something like that?
He went and played in the NBA. I mean, I don't know.
Seems like,
sure.
Somebody fact check that, but I swear, like when he was in college, like he got into a bad car wreck, and then something happened that kind of messed him up from. I mean, he did go on and stuff, but I just don't think he was ever the same ball player after that. But anyway, yeah. So the whole movie really culminates with that end game, the Indiana game, and that's the first game of the season. And if I'm not mistaken,
Right.
like that's the big game. And there's some great actual like basketball scenes. They really capture kind of what it's like to be, on a basketball court, through that and the way that it's filmed too. And I'm sure he just had him actually play fucking basketball. Like there's probably, and just filmed all of it, I thought that part of it was like really, really well filmed and rehearsed.
Well, and I think that time frame too, because like I was saying earlier, I was big into college and pro basketball, around the 90, 93, 94, 95 era. And they kind of captured that, that whole vibe around that time, which really kind of took me back. There's a documentary out as well, that This Magic Moment or something like that was the name of it, about have you seen that?
No.
The Orlando Magic. Yeah, they called them the greatest basketball team to never win an NBA championship. And
I believe
they were talking about that period of time. And that kind of the same thing with Blue Chips. It really brought me back to that era. And I have fond memories of seeing this in the movie theater. Now, it's kind of an oddly paced movie, though. It definitely doesn't seem like something. Had it not had some of these big names attached to it, Shaq and Nick Nolte and, even William Friedkin directing at the time was still a pretty big name as a director, I guess. I don't know if it would have come out by itself in theaters at all.
Well, honestly, I thought it was pretty good. I don't watch basketball, but I'll watch any good movie about any sport if the movie is good. I love Field of Dreams. I don't watch baseball, but I love Field of Dreams. I love there's lots of good baseball movies. I thought it was a good movie. But to me, this one played, except for the cursing and Nick Nolte screaming and cursing, this one played to me almost like a made-for-TV movie. The way that it's shot, very polished and very bright, and of course I watched it on streaming. I watched it on the Prime channel, Amazon Prime channel, I guess in HD or whatever. But in the dialogue, the way it's written, to me, this plays like a TV movie.
There was something about it. Yeah, there was something about this movie, Jay. You're right. I don't know if I thought that it was like a TV movie, but I thought that it was like that they either cut stuff out of it or like it just seemed unfinished somehow or another. Like it's
And
just
also,
there's
it's PG-13, and you wonder with Friedkin directing if maybe in order to get a wider audience, if maybe some of the language was cut or some of the particularly if Nick Nolte in the lead, you think he would say worse than what he did. And I wonder if the original script didn't have some R-rated cursing or
probably.
more intense stuff, and particularly with that character.
And
that was trimmed to get the PG-13 rating.
that ending though is just very not William Friedkin to me. Like that's just a typical. As a matter of fact, it's worse than like a typical Hollywood ending at that time. It's like even more kind of unbelievable and like sappy and like than most films even around that time period. So, I mean, the ending of the movie for those people that care, or if you don't want to hear this, probably not listen to it. But like,
Yeah, you should have already seen the fucking movie by
Yeah.
now, boys.
the ending of the movie is basically, and this is the part that I really didn't like about this movie, is so they get through this game and they win the game, and he goes to the press conference. This would never happen in like the 100 and some years of basketball. Like this has never happened to my knowledge. So this is like some fantasy or something. So he goes to this press conference, and this Ed O'Neill character asks him a couple questions or something, and he just fucking breaks, and he's like, "Yeah, we fucking did it. We bought this, this, and this," and he's like, "Fuck you all, I'm out." And then just like that's yeah, and that's the end of the movie. Really, like you got some of those little things that pop up.
Well, you
tell
get information at the end about
Yeah.
what's happened. That the team was like a 3-year suspension, that they couldn't play or whatever, couldn't compete. But,
That just does not happen. Like any coach that's ever got caught doing that, they just got caught. Like they never came out and was like,
and
"Yeah,
then Nick Nolte's character wound up, coaching a high school basketball team. That's how he wound up. And they did that. Where everyone wound up. That little.
Yeah, Shaq and Penny went on to, of course, the NBA.
yeah."
Should have said the Orlando Magic, but they didn't know, I guess, at the time.
But honestly, I think he is, if not the best part of the movie, he's very close as Shaquille O'Neal. I was surprised how much I enjoyed his performance in the movie. I don't know if I'd seen him in anything,
Well, this was the debut movie, of course. I think he went on to do, what was it, Shazam? Was that
God,
it?
yeah.
Shazam or something like that. And Steel? You remember Steel?
Steel, the Superman movie, yeah. God.
Oh. I don't know if he's done
hard.
much else, though. I mean, I remember those, Shazam and Steel.
And it's another movie that if I didn't know William Friedkin directed it, I wouldn't have imagined that he directed.
No.
I mean, there's no real. I mean, Uncle Bill brought up a few points as far as, some of the character points or some of the points in the movie that was kind of William Friedkin, but you couldn't have shown this movie to me and say, "Hey, guess who directed this?" And William Friedkin would never have popped in my mind that he directed this.
I remember of the president of the university was actually a basketball player, like back in the 40s or something like that. Bob Cousy was his name. I think he played for Boston Celtics. And you know how old he was in the movie, right? He's still alive. That dude is still fucking alive somehow. So I think he's close to almost 100 years old.
I tell you, something funny I heard about that scene too, is the scene in the movie with Bob Cousy is one where like Nick Nolte's talking to him.
And he's getting basket after basket after basket.
Yeah, and he's just like
basket.
He's shooting, free throws basically. So that was like one take, and he didn't miss any of the free throws.
Not a single one.
That was like kind of part of the scene where Nick Nolte, he's like, you can't even miss. Like
you can't even miss with your left hand.
Yeah. He's just like
crazy. Yeah, because he was probably 60 some years old then, right?
Had to be, yeah.
And there's maybe I don't know if there's any cuts to that scene. There might be.
No, there's not. There's not.
And it's just stays on him, stays on the two shot of them, and him just one right after the other. That was just something else, making every basket.
Which is crazy. That's one of the better scenes in the. It reminds me. There's like a training video of Larry Bird, and he's like trying to show you like how not to shoot. So he messes up like his the way he holds the ball, and he shoots it and still makes it. He's like trying to show you like.
Well, who is it? Is not Shaquille? Is it Shaquille O'Neal? Or is it who else that can't make the free?
Yeah, it's Shaq. Yeah,
he can't do it. He can't make a free throw.
Right.
No.
Yeah, you remember the Hack-a-Shack back in the day? People were talking about that.
They were talking about they used to foul Shaq on purpose because they knew he couldn't hit free throws
in close games. Yeah, especially. But yeah, man, I mean, it just, to me, Blue Chips, I enjoy it. I've always kind of liked it. I don't think it's a great movie, but it's a pretty good movie. And I think the big thing with me is it captures that period of the time. The early 90s, college basketball was fucking killer. Like, it was a killer time to watch college basketball in particular. Now, not so much. You know, I know we're in Kentucky, so everybody always still wants to talk about Kentucky basketball with us and stuff like that. I don't give a fuck anymore. I mean, it's not fun to watch anymore. There's a new group of guys every year. I mean, as much as we shit on Pitino, you know, the Pitino era in Kentucky was great. I even think the Tubby Smith era in Kentucky was great.
The Billy Gillespie era was awesome.
Billy Gillespie, man, he partied like it was 1985 the whole time.
He had his year or two, and then But you're right though. Like college basketball in our state now is just it's a fucking pre-camp for NBA players. That's all it is. Like they have 2 or 3 people every year that go to the NBA, and so you never have a decent team because they never play together any more than a year. They always get beat really early on in the tournament now, and it's like just I don't even bother watching it that much anymore because I know what's going to happen. But anyway, thoughts about this movie though, like rewatching it from the time I was 14 or whatever until now. I still liked it. I still thought that it was a good movie, and like it had some really good performances by Nolte and JT Walsh and Shaq and a couple other people.
Who else was in there? Robert Wall. How do you pronounce his name? Robert Wall.
They had.
Was he in it?
Yeah, he had a little part in it.
I mean, they had a lot of random people too, like Dick Vitale was in it.
That's right. Yeah.
There was some other players that I didn't put their names down here, but I know I saw Bobby Hurley. We mentioned him, and this university played for the Indiana Hoosiers, which was hilarious. But yeah, I mean, it's just a fun time capsule of that period, I think.
Yeah, I think it's nostalgia for us mostly, like from watching that.
Well, I think maybe I've seen clips of it through the years, but I've never seen the whole movie proper. And I enjoyed it. I mean, I've always enjoyed watching Nick Nolte, act the fool and just scream his head off.
Yeah.
Which he does so well in this movie and in other movies, But so I enjoyed it for his performance and for Shaq's performance. Like I say, I don't really do basketball. There's a team, in Waco, the Baylor University. They won national championship a couple of years ago.
Mm-hmm.
They're pretty good, and so if they're playing a national championship or something like that, I'll watch that and enjoy watching if they're playing a big game or something. So I enjoyed it, for what it was.
Yeah, I mean, if I had to rate it, I'd give it like a 6 out of 10, something like that.
Yeah, me too. That's what I'll do. 6 out of 10.
I'd give it a 7 out of 10 just because, Shaq was in it, bro.
That's right.
Check this out. Further proof that I don't throw a fucking thing away.
And that, like you were telling me, that's like an original around like 92, right?
Yeah, that was like right when Shaq hit the NBA, and I think Champion was the name of the company that did these little jerseys. You could find them in Foot Locker all the time and all that at malls. So yeah, I still have that one.
People don't realize how big that guy was, though. I mean, he was Not how big he was. I'm just talking about how like popular and famous he was around that time. Like,
Oh, you remember I
was-
had the Shaq Nosa shoes in high school. Do you remember those?
yes, yeah.
Well, didn't and at the time they had the for the Olympics, the basketball Olympic, and it was just no contest. They would just wipe them out every time,
I think it was wasn't it the '92 team that was so killer, like the
Yeah,
the
The
92,
Dream
93
Team,
team. Yeah,
there
like where
really
they just
wasn't. There was no competition. Just
no, they were
Yeah, that
blowing
was-
teams out by like 50 or 60 points.
Well,
Like,
all the teams prior to that were all college players, so then they didn't let the NBA guys in the Olympics until 90. I think 92 was the first Olympics where those guys all formed like the mega team and they just fucking kicked the shit out of everybody.
yeah, the mega powers collided with everybody on that one for sure. All right, so before we get into the Exorcist, let's see who's here. So we've got MacBoy Colors here. So everybody say hi to him. Red.
Blue Chips is an underrated movie.
Yeah. Joe Bob Tarhill. Yeah, he's there. Brandon Dvork. Anthony's
Lone
on
Star
here.
Beer and Dead Pit Bulls. What's up, Anthony? He was at the Monster Mania show that everybody's talking about.
Oh, yeah. What happened there? As if we didn't know.
Yeah.
Blair Hathaway. Yeah, it's good to see you. Category 3 and me. Garrett's on here somewhere. He's probably lurking in the shadows.
Yeah. He was a Shaq Mark as well.
X-Ray Punch says that Blue Chips is better than Space Jam. I mean,
I was never big into okay, there's a couple things. I was not a Michael Jordan fan as a kid. I just wasn't. And I never I watched Space Jam once and it's okay, but to me it was a little kid's movie.
yeah, I mean, it's all right. It's a hell of a lot better than the LeBron James Space Jam. I'll say that.
Oh, I'm sure, yeah.
VIP users in here. He says, be honest, which movie is worse, Creepshow 3 or The Exorcist 2? Creepshow 3 is a lot worse, really.
Yeah, they're both pretty damn bad though.
Mike Kinney says that Shaq is definitely a better actor than he is a rapper.
No doubt. Shaq Diesel Bulls, that was his rap album, I think.
Tainer says that Hurley's accident was his rookie season in the NBA. Okay. I knew it was, I thought it was in college, but I knew it was right around the time he entered the NBA because it just screwed his career up. I'm pretty sure that he was, up until that point he was really, really dominant, and then it just kind of messed all that up.
It's insane the fucking players that come from Duke around that time too.
True. Stuntman Mark's here. Eastside Motel's here.
East side player.
The mayor's here, but he's here. He says he's here just for the Exorcist. Buddy, Blue Chips.
Not a
off the
blue
chain.
chip fan.
All right. And that's the majority of people that
We
are
got
in
an
here.
interesting one from Tainer here. Let's pull it up.
What's he say?
They filmed the basketball scenes half an hour from where I grew up. I didn't get to go to any of the filming because I had driver's ed that summer. My friend went and made the opening credits. So where did they film that at, Tainer? If you don't mind me asking.
We're going to come down there to your house. See you.
We'll go on some filming locations for Blue Chips.
That would be the best vlog ever. We're here where they film Blue Chips.
Look, it's like an arena.
Oh my God, bulls. Look here. Subjective, perspective, collective. He's here.
It says he's not here.
He's not here. He's like John Cena.
Bobby Knight's team kicked the shit out of Nolte's team.
Huh. Frankfort, Indiana. That's probably not too far away from here, I'd say.
Probably not. Probably near Indianapolis, I bet.
But all right. This is what everybody came to the dance for, I'm pretty sure. So, Yeah, probably the most infamous movie ever made. I would say the most infamous horror film ever made. A lot of people say it's the scariest horror film ever made, and it really did revolutionize uh, horror films because I don't think up until this point in 1973 there was not really like a huge blockbuster horror film that people like you know had to see, and there was lines like around the block and people were fainting and passing out and shitting their pants and you know just acting a fool. But that was the case for The Exorcist in 1973. Jay, I got to hear your thoughts on this. Like,
Well, I'll tell you, first of all, it's one of my favorite movies, period. And I don't categorize it as a horror film, which I don't usually do that for horror films or any other film. I just put them in a category of favorite movies.
yeah,
You
neither
know,
does Freakin'. He doesn't think it's a
you
horror
know,
film either.
Jaws is my favorite movie, but it, Exorcist may be number two. I'm not sure exactly, but it's way up there. And I don't really categorize it as a horror film. I don't really see it as a horror film. It's horrific. Some horrific things happen in it, but I just see it as just a really well made, very well acted, very well constructed movie. Um, and I could talk, for days about The Exorcist, just how it impacts way that it affects me, and just how well made a movie I think it is. Um, but the very first time I saw The Exorcist was on network television.
God.
Oh shit!
And it was Channel 10, KWTX, CBS, and they aired The Exorcist. And back then, I used to record movies on audio cassette. I had one of them little cheap audio cassette recorders, and I recorded the network television premiere of The Exorcist, and I listened to that thing over and over and over again. And you can imagine, how that must have looked, what they cut.
Oh
Um,
yeah.
and I knew, I believe my sister had seen it during the time, because, in 73, I was, 7, 8, years old. And I think my sister saw it, but she wouldn't tell me much about it. She goes, "Oh, Jay, this is not for you," or whatever. She really kind of hem and haw about it. Um, so, was it 1980, 81 or something like that when they had that, the network premiere on broadcast
Well,
television?
and that was, a lot of people may not know, that was a big deal then. I mean, because this was before a lot of people had VCRs or other ways to watch movies. So, a couple of years later, like I remember the Halloween movies were big when they started coming out on TV. They even filmed new scenes for them.
And I certainly couldn't attest to this, but they may have actually made some scenes that were appropriate for television that were filmed during the time. Now, I don't know if Friedkin has ever admitted to that or not, or, I've seen several documentaries about The Exorcist, but that's one thing I can't remember, is if there was ever a
I would say that
broadcast
footage,
fault,
well, the
version.
studio would have it. So I'm sure like it would have made one of these releases if it exists.
Yeah. But But in, oh God, it must have been something like 88, 89 or something like that. The Corsicana Theater, where I saw Texas Chainsaw Massacre around 85, 84, is where I first saw Texas Chainsaw Massacre at the Corsicana Theater. They had, I don't know how they got to print, but they had The Exorcist and showed The Exorcist. And that's where I first saw the proper version of The Exorcist, was at the Corsicana. I actually saw it in a movie theater and saw it, properly, 35 millimeter print, and just was blown away by so much of it. Um, anyway, y'all go ahead. This is a movie that I could just go on and on.
Well, here's the weird thing with me and The Exorcist is it's a movie that kind of escaped me up until the version you'd never seen came out, like in 2000. and there was so much hype for this. So this was the first time that I can recall, and this was released everywhere. All the theaters had this, a wide theatrical run for this. I think it was like the 25th anniversary of The Exorcist.
Well, and the Blu-ray I've got is, and I imagine it's pretty rare now, but it's, it's got the extended director's cut is what they call it here, and it's 2 discs.
Yeah. It's not that rare, Jay. I got it too.
But it's not. You got it, okay? Well, not that rare.
This Blu-ray still looks amazing too.
Yeah, it does. Yeah, I watched it today with my friend Barry. We watched the original cut today.
From 2010 is when this Blu-ray came out. So
no. This one is like 2001 when it come out. I got this. Oh gosh,
that's a Blu-ray, Jay.
Yeah, a Blu-ray, but I don't know. Maybe did I get it in 2010? I'll shut up.
Yeah,
maybe so. It's the Blu-ray. Yeah, it is Blu-ray. It's the
I think the I could only find the VHS, but this one right here is the one that came out like 2000. The version you've never seen, but we've all seen it at this point, hopefully. But that was my introduction to it. And it's a crazy long version too. Like I don't know. Yeah, it's 2 hours and almost 2 hours and 15 minutes. So it adds about 15 more minutes of footage. And oddly enough, it was really difficult around the time this came out. There was a standard DVD of it that had the theatrical version on it, but that was not very easy to track down. So this was the only version of the movie I'd seen for years and years. And I don't know what it was, if it was just the almost like the mystique of The Exorcist, and people always talking about it's the craziest fucking movie ever. But for some reason, that was one that I never did as a kid go and rent or anything like that.
I think I probably saw it the first time when I was 16 or 17, and it was one of those ones that was like hyped up so much, like you were saying, when like everybody always, especially at that time, like not so much now because so much effects and gore and stuff has kind of eclipsed that movie now, but like back at that period, everybody was like, oh, it's like the scariest film, it's like the the stuff that you'll see in it is crazy and all this,
people fainting in the theater,
yeah,
and had to be carried out,
and I had the opposite. See, like the first time I watched the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, I had the reaction of like, oh, this is kind of shitty, because like in my mind, I'm thinking like it's going to be just like blood and guts and gore everywhere, and like all hell breaks loose and chainsaws everywhere. And it's really not like that.
There's very little actual blood in the movie.
Yeah, so I was kind of disappointed the first time I saw it. The first time I saw The Exorcist, I was fucking terrified. Like it wasn't. I had the exact opposite reaction. Like I was, like I said, 16, and I was still like, I don't need to be watching this movie. Like there's a lot of stuff in that movie it's just like, if you have any kind of like religious background, faith, anything like that, you're watching it and you literally feel like I should not be watching this.
Well, I feel that some of the stuff that's in this movie, it doesn't prepare you for it at all. It just fucking smacks you in the face with it.
Yeah.
From the get-go, because probably the first 30, 45 minutes of the movie, it's a slow build. I mean, it's a very well-made movie. You can tell. Like there's so many people in this movie that were not actors. That's another thing that we should bring up. Like, I think it was Karis's mother. She was not an actor, and she did a fucking killer job. Like a legit. You would never thought that was a woman that never acted in anything before, like an 89-year-old woman.
Yeah, Demi, why you do this to me, Demi?
There was some real priests. Somehow they talked fucking legit priests into being in this movie. And I think
behind, on set, their priest would come and like bless the set and and say a prayer.
Well, there's the guy, like this is one of the best stories from the movie. The guy that was the priest who at the end, when Karis falls down the steps and everything, that he blesses him and gives him the last rites before he dies. That's a real priest. And in that scene, I remember like Friedkin was talking about like he couldn't get him to like really, get into that or like show emotion and things like that he wanted him to. So I think he just smacked the piss out of him like right before the scene, and
Well,
then like
that's something, of course, Friedkin always had the reputation of is going all out to get a shot,
yeah.
even if it meant the physical harm of the actors involved. Um, and
So yeah, like
look what poor Ellen Burstyn goes through in this movie, where she's thrown out and she's slapped and she's punched and she's thrown to the floor, and she was really hurt. She really, sustained some real physical.
There was
harm.
another interesting story. There's a documentary out that Uncle Bill was the one who was telling me about this. It's on Shudder.
Yeah.
That it's basically, this is fucking amazing too. I mean, maybe we should review the documentary at some point as well, because they shot an interview with William Friedkin all in one day, and some of the shit that he recalled about the details, the making of, like, it was some of the most interesting shit ever. But he told the story about Stacy Keach was originally Father Karras.
Yeah.
He had already been hired, signed the contract and everything. And then what was his name? Jason Miller, I think, was the one that they went with. Relatively unknown actor, but he had read the script and was like, I would really like to read for this because I think I am Father Karras. That's me. And he was like, well, I don't know why you want to read it. We've already signed the contracts. Stacy Keach is a name in Hollywood. He's going to be but he ended up reading for it and completely nailing the character, so much so that William Friedkin somehow talked the studio into still paying Stacy Keach off his entire salary and bringing Jason Miller in to the movie as the lead, one of the leads, Father Karras.
This is a great part about that too, which is like Friedkin was talking about it, and he was saying basically after the French Connection, that won like 5 Oscars. So he could do whatever he wanted. Like the studios, were just giving him whatever he wanted. So yeah, like he paid off Stacy Keach and then, brought on Jason Miller to be the guy who he really wanted. And I mean, there's so many great stories behind this movie. I like to watch that documentary and then go back and watch the movie, because like the scene where Jason Miller, like the phone rings and like he's startled by it ringing and he kind of like jumps and turns over. Like fucking Friedkin was hiding somewhere with a revolver and he was shooting blanks. So like he would be surprised. He didn't tell him he was going to do it or anything. He just shot a gun like right around him. So he would get that reaction. Just like that's back when directors did shit like that. And even Friedkin said like he would never do that today. Like the stuff that he used to do like at that time period, but it worked. Like he got like these amazing performances from all these people.
When you hear Ellen Burstyn talk, nowadays talk about the making of the movie, and they still have a good relationship, her and William Friedkin, but they both admit, he went little too far in getting some of the shots, with her in particular. And got hurt, in particular when she's, is stabbing herself with the cross, and she slaps her, and then she hits the floor. That she actually sustained some real harm, in doing that, and in some other scenes, but like you say, that was just during a time, particularly in Friedkin's case, where I guess that was allowed or that was overlooked in some way, it going to that extreme to get the shot or get what he required on film or what required in his mind.
Well, the opening shot as well was filmed in Iraq, legit.
Yeah.
I didn't know that either.
And that whole sequence with Max von Sydow, that whole bit is one of my favorite things ever committed to film.
Well, mine too, and I think it sets up like the movie perfectly. But like, from what I can understand, the producers wanted him to just take all that shit out, and even Blatty wanted him to, because
the original script, it wasn't like Blatty took it out, like it wasn't in the original script of the movie.
It was just supposed to start, there with the mother and the daughter, but he was like, no, you can't do that. Like, it's got to begin in Iraq, because that like sets the whole tone And it does, like, because you just have this feeling like this ancient kind of evil exists, from watching the first part of the movie.
Pazuzu,
Right, and that
which to my knowledge, and I've seen the movie 100 times, is never mentioned in the movie. Pazuzu's never mentioned. But if you watch any reviews or hear any talk about it, they talk about Pazuzu. That's the name of the demon, and that's the name of the
well,
statue
Pazuzu, it was
in the
in.
film.
They mentioned it in the sequel.
Yeah. Well, not
Yeah.
only do they mention it,
Woo.
it's recited over and over and over. The demons, I am Pazuzu, I am Pazuzu. And it's like, I've seen that movie one time in my life, and that was it.
My favorite quote from that movie, from Linda
God.
Blair.
I was possessed by a demon.
Yeah.
But that whole sequence at the beginning when he's in Iraq, and it's they're digging up the ancient ruins, and and it's brought to his attention that there's hey, this one of the little kids or whatever it is that's been digging and runs up to him. And it's great Dick Smith makeup on Max von Sydow, because what was he, like in his 30s or something when he shot this film?
That's amazing to me. Like, I never knew that until, further along after you kind of get into the movie. But
and that's something that Dick Smith in particular could do so well, was old age makeup, like what he did with Dustin Hoffman and Little Big Man, and just
didn't he do Jonathan Frid too? Like his old age makeup in the House of Dark
Probably.
Shadows. I think it's the same. If he didn't, it's the same effect of like whatever they did. But I thought he did.
But I didn't know either until I believe watching a documentary about it or something like that. Didn't know he wasn't that age, and so it's just, I mean, even on Blu-ray and watching it, polished up, it looks great.
One thing that they touch on in this movie too, briefly, they don't bring it back up again, was that Reagan had been fucking around with a Ouija board as well, and we know.
Yeah.
You don't go messing with a Ouija board, right?
And you hear spirits from the Dark Lord, yeah. Or voices. So that scene, though, you're talking about the Iraq scene and everything, I remember hearing him say he just filmed things that were going on around him. Like, none of those people are actors, and none of that shit except for, like, I think even the dig was legitimate. Like, those people were actually doing some sort of dig, and he just filmed, like, a lot of the shit that was going on. So, like, everybody you see in it, like the guy with the eye that's all messed up and the little kids running around, like, all of that is legitimately just there, like stuff he just filmed. And then he kind of just interconnected it with everything else going on in the story, and people think he's a genius, but he just, like, was just filming shit that was around him, which makes it work even better somehow.
Well, and there's, he picks up, he's digging around in the excavation site or whatever, and he finds a little rock or something like that. He brushes away the dirt and all that, and it's a little head of Pazuzu, like I say, the demon. And then there's that, one of the best shots in movie history is that long shot of Max von Sydow standing on that rock and facing down the demon. And don't the demon have like a erect penis? But it's that great shot, and the wind's blowing and the dust is blowing, and he's facing down the evil that he will encounter later in the film. That's the way I took it. When you watch the movie and finish watching the movie, and you look at that shot where he's, facing the statue of the demon. And so that's what, sets that up, which you don't know when you're at the beginning of it, but later that he's facing the evil that he will face later,
Yeah. So it goes from that to from Iraq to kind of like present day. Where are they? Massachusetts or some shit? I can't remember like what city it is or anything. But
I think it's near Pennsylvania or so, like in,
okay,
if I'm not mistaken, Pennsylvania or.
But Ellen Burstyn's which you don't see this a lot either. Ellen Burstyn is an actress in the movie, like that's her profession or whatever. And Linda Blair Reagan is just her daughter, kind of following around and whatnot. and they got moved into a new house. She's working on this film, and like slowly but surely, weird kind of stuff starts to happen around the house. Like Burston goes up to
That sound in the attic,
the attic.
it
Yeah.
always gets me every time. That sound, I can't even describe it.
And I think that's the first inkling that you get that something is going on. Like,
and of course she thinks it's rats, but it don't sound anything like rats. It's this kind of crashing, crumbling sound that you just have to hear. But every time that they play that sound, I jump. I mean, that's a great effect, that sound in the attic that Ellen Burstyn hears. You know.
And so and then the second real big thing that happens, I think, everybody remembers this scene, is like she starts to get, progressively sicker, talking about Reagan. And the first time you really notice this is like they're having this big party downstairs, and she's got all these directors and actors and other kind of, celebrities or whatever down there with her. And they're playing piano and singing, and Reagan just comes downstairs, and she just tells like one of the astronauts, she's like, "You're gonna die up there," and then she just pisses like all over the carpet. And I can't watch that scene anymore without thinking about fucking Scary Movie 2. I don't know why, but like that scene where anyway.
No, but she's talking specifically, I think, isn't it, to that Burt Dennings, or had he already left the party by then? I think
he was there.
Yeah,
I think so. Yeah,
because he was the one that actually was thrown from her.
Yeah, from the yeah.
But we should go back to when Linda Blair is introduced, Reagan is introduced, and her mother have a little conversation. She wants to buy, what a horse. She rode a horse earlier that day. And it's a really good introduction to the character of Reagan, good acting from Linda Blair. But she shows a little paper mache bird she's made, which is obviously Pazuzu in like a cartoon form, in like a kid's version of Pazuzu. It's got a beak and it's got wings and it's colorful. And she shows her mother this, I guess it's paper mache or some kind of figure she's made. Yeah, what's that? That's weird, And then she brings out the Ouija board, and from the very first thing that happens, the Ouija, whatever do you call the thing that you put on the Ouija board? What's that called? The Ouija. It moves on its own. When Ellen Burstyn's trying to put her hands on it, it moves by itself. And that should be an indication from the very beginning.
You would think that she would be a little bit more concerned.
Yeah. But she's like, "Well, you don't want me to play?" And it's like, "I didn't do it. Captain Howdy did it." And we got to talk about Captain Howdy. Captain Howdy is her friend that she talks to, by herself. And that's her friend. And I guess the bird that she made is supposed to be Captain Howdy. But she talks, Captain Howdy talks to me. And so we're introduced to Captain Howdy, that by now, I guess if you've never seen the movie before and like that, I don't know if you would have the feeling that Captain Howdy is this, the statue that you've seen earlier. That's kind of introduced more later in the film. But something's not right, with this Ouija, thing moving on its own, and her talking about Captain Howdy and hearing the strange noises in the attic. There's definitely something afoot. But like I say, she acts like it's just not a big deal, like Ellen Burstyn. "Oh, you don't want me to play?" "No, it's not me. It's Captain Howdy don't want you to play," And she says,
up until that point too, like I think, if that were a real situation, which is what I think Friedkin's always going to, that's kind of how you would be. Like, you wouldn't really think anything supernatural is going on. You would just think, well, something's wrong with my kid or something's, and it really doesn't take a turn until much later in the movie to where it gets to the point where it's like, okay, something really is fucking going on here that's beyond, just somebody sick. Yeah.
Yeah, because she runs the gamut with different doctors and people like scanning her brain, like what the hell's going on. Jamie mentioned the the needle thing in her neck, that is kind of squeamish for those that are like, yeah,
Well,
it looks
that whole
legit.
sequence is just that's nerve wracking. That whole sequence where they're giving her the brain scan and they're putting a needle in her neck and all that, and hooking her up to these machines
Yeah.
and making that bam 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 sound.
Yeah.
See, I had one of those scans done. I didn't have the needle in the neck, and I think it was a damn video game I was playing that was causing me to be dizzy. It was like during the old PS2 games, and there was some kind of game that was real flashy, and I would just get dizzy as hell. And I had one of those brain scans done, and it made that damn sound. And it's like 45 minutes of being in the dark, having this thing over your face, laying down, and you have to be very still. They put this heavy thing on your chest made out of lead or whatever it is, and that sound, that bam 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 bam, that's very accurate. I had one of those things. They didn't find anything. I think I've self-diagnosed myself as it was this damn video game I was playing. I can't remember what it was. That was causing me to be dizzy. They didn't find anything in the scan, but that's very accurate. That, of course, this was technology from like 73 or whatever, It had advanced some when I had it, but still made that damn noise, that loud banging noise. That unnerves me every time I see that whole sequence.
It's a horror. That whole scene, yeah, is horrifying. Like that, and just like she's progressively kind of getting worse and kind of attacking the doctors and stuff like that, and just they stick the thing in and blood shoots out, and like just the whole thing is just really uncomfortable to watch.
Meanwhile, all this stuff's going on with the McNeils. You kind of get a little bit of backstory on Damien Karras's character as well, with his mother, and I think another really effective scene. Of course, his mother, the actress that played his mother, passed away before the film ever came out. Like she was like late 80s around that time period, and I don't know if the story was she had a stroke or she fell at her house and had to be committed to this institution. And there's a scene where Damien goes to visit her, and man, like, because that's just dead on to what some of those places are like too. Like the people running up to you and grabbing you and like begging you to take them from there or whatever. And then the portrayal from the mother about, why you do this to me, Dini? And it's like she's in hell almost. And there's a lot of scenes that Damien's having nightmares and stuff about this afterwards, because I think she dies shortly thereafter, and he's kind of dealing with that personal type of situation as well. And I like the way that they do the character development in this movie. You don't see it in the horror movies.
No, but they do though. They like flesh out every character in the movie really before like you meet him. And that scene in particular that you're talking about, where he has like a nightmare where he sees his mother come up out of a subway and she's screaming at him, but he can't hear anything that she's saying, and he's trying to like run to get to her, but she goes back down. That's just like a dream. Like that's just exactly like a dream that probably.
And you get that split-second shot of that face, that demon face.
Yeah,
that's Eileen Dietz is who that is. I met her at the first Texas Frightmare weekend I went to. Real nice lady. And she did some extra stuff too. Some of it, I think, when she's stabbing herself in the crotch, that's actually Eileen Dietz doing that, I believe. The close up of the crotch is actually Eileen Dietz, but real nice lady. But that's her face, that demon face, and you see that it's so fast you have to freeze frame it to see it. But that's in that sequence, that nightmare sequence.
I gotta say too, though, like that. They use that perfectly in the theatrical version. In the extended version, they really kind of wear that shit out. Like it's up on the stove when Ellen Burstyn's like doing. It's like you don't need that. Like it needed to be subliminal like that, where you just barely like see it for like a half a second, and you're like, "What the fuck?"
It's so fast, but it's almost like a subliminal image that you wonder, did I see that? But did I just see something really fucking horrific? But it's so fast, but it's perfectly done.
It's placed in there, yeah, like to
Because
where
you know you've seen it. You're not quite sure what you've seen, but you know you've seen it. And of course, you've seen that image 1,000 times on the internet and all that of that demon face, Eileen Deach, painted up. But it's so in the movie proper, it's so fast, but it's done just right in the right frame, right time too.
and somebody mentioned this on here. I forgot about this, or forgot to mention this, but like in the scenes we were talking about with the biopsy or the testing or whatever they're doing, yeah, there's a guy, the radiology tech. If you go back and watch the movie, not the main doctor, but just the guy who kind of wheels Linda Blair in and kind of helps set up some of the stuff. He turns out to be a serial killer, a real life serial killer. I forget what they called him, but his MO was that he went to like leather bars, SDM bars, and he would kill men that he was with and then like dump their bodies in the river. So he inspired like Cruising, the movie Cruising. And I always just thought that was the craziest shit, that was a real like serial killer that just happened to pop up in that movie of all the movies.
I thought another interesting story about The Exorcist that William Friedkin mentioned in that documentary is the score of the movie.
Oh yeah.
Which Bernard Herrmann was originally supposed to do the score of the movie, and he was not a fan. He said, I think Friedkin said that
this is so cute.
Bernard was like, well, maybe I can fix this piece of shit for you or something. Was not a fan at all, and really pissed him off. Of course, William Friedkin, man, that's the one thing that I really like about him is he's got a vision and he's going to stick to it. If somebody can explain to him what's wrong about it, he'll listen to him, but he kind of sticks with what he wants. And what ended up happening is the score for The Exorcist was essentially pieced together with a lot of music that was already out there, and they had hired like an orchestra to redo it. And the Tubular Bells theme music, he was looking for something that sounded like a lullaby or whatever. That's what he wanted to be like the main theme for the movie. And the Tubular Bells song is what he picked. And I couldn't imagine anything else being in that spot, because that kind of goes, that's the Exorcist music,
I remember I had a 45 of that song of Tubular Bells, I think way before I saw the movie itself, I had the 45 of Tubular Bells and used to listen to it all the time.
That's just it's a perfect score for that movie, because it's just one continuous kind of like thing that loops that main theme, and it's not too much. Like it doesn't overpower the scenes or anything. It's just kind of in the background, and it's just something that everybody always associates with The Exorcist now, like that creepy ass kind of theme.
Mike Oldfield, it's a 26-minute song. The whole song is.
Yeah, I've listened to a lot of it.
The 45 wasn't 26 minutes.
I've listened to a lot of it. It goes off in like a million different directions. It doesn't really stay on that one main part very long, and but that one main part is the one that everybody knows too.
Yeah, Mike Oldfield. So I don't know how old that song is, but I'm guessing it'd been around many years before The Exorcist came out.
Yeah, it's a great.
But as far as Jason Miller's character, that's another thing that when I put it up so high in my list of films is just his character. Period. This priest, psychiatrist. He's a psychiatrist. He's a religious psychiatrist, I guess you'd say. Priest, not psychiatrist. What am I thinking? He's mental.
He is a psychiatrist.
He's a psychiatrist, and a priest. But just his character, having this sort of crisis of faith with what's happened to his mother, we find out and that's something that the one thing that I'll say is I don't know if it's a flaw, but it happens so quickly. Is right after he visits his mother in the mental institution, we hear this guy talking about how his mother had died, and they didn't find her for like 2 days. So I guess Jason Miller, after seeing her in the mental institution, just couldn't bring himself to go see her. But I'm like, well, when I first couple of times I saw it, I wondered, well, does that mean that the mental institution was like a dream sequence or something, and she died at home? Because that happened so quickly after that sequence. After that sequence at the mental institution, we hear she's died at home, and it's been 2 days. It was 2 days before they found her body, and that happens just like almost right after that scene at the mental institution when it's revealed that she's died.
Yeah, that is kind of odd.
And I just wondered, well, does that mean that the mental institution was supposed to be like a nightmare that he had, or did that actually happen? But I guess it actually happened. But it just happened so quickly in the film that I almost think, well, something should have bridged that a little better,
I mean, and I kind of think Friedkin does that a lot in these movies. Like, having watched them, he kind of cuts too quickly to something else. I don't know if that's just like a editing style, or if he just wants to move on to like, so he just kind of like rushes too quickly into something. It's a pretty common thing in a lot of his movies, I've noticed too.
But just talking about this character of having this crisis of faith, it's like he's not even sure if he believes anymore, and he's drinking, he gets drunk, and then he's what's happened to his mother, and he feels so guilty about it that he wasn't there for her. And so
I love the idea in this movie too, though, that you've got like the young priest who's got like a crisis of faith. He doesn't know if like he still wants to do this, and then you've got the old priest who's just like 100% committed. Knows that like what he's doing is right, and those two kind of just meet up at the end.
Then you think, towards the end too, where he gets to the house, and of course that iconic shot right there. It's like a painting.
One of the best shots of just in any movie.
It's almost like a Old West showdown or something, right? Because he knows what he's up against.
It's foreshadowing for sure. Like they're this light hitting him as he's coming in.
Yeah. And man, like as far as, I think that it's one of those movies that from that point, you're in that bedroom with those guys. I mean, it's one of the very few movies that I can think of where it puts the viewer right there.
And you see their breath, they brought the temperature down on this set, and kept this temperature down where you see their breath. It's so cold in that room. And, I guess you talk about specific scenes, and of course there's the famous, "Let Jesus fuck you," where she's stabbing herself with the cross.
God damn. That's hardcore.
And just a minute, y'all go ahead. Mercedes McCambridge, that's her name.
That to me is the best story to come out of this movie.
Now that she was an actress. She's in like Giant. She's kind of a small, kind of a short woman. And speaking of going through a physical ordeal, what he put her through to get that voice. I mean, what all she chain smoking and what, like raw eggs or what all
whiskey.
The worst part about it to me is that basically like she told him, she was like, so because he remembered her voice because she's got a very distinctive voice anyway, and so Friedkin's interviewing her about this role, and she's like, I haven't touched a drink of alcohol in like so many years or whatever. But for me to do this, I'm going to need like liquor and like a thing of eggs, a pack of cigarettes. Like, she's like giving up all this stuff. And so basically the sound of it, she like locked herself in a room and almost had like a nervous breakdown after a couple of days of just like, fucking her voice up by smoking and drinking. And
it may be actually on that Blu-ray set where it's got some audio of her just kind of improvising and and just saying stuff. And it's just like, oh God, what this woman put herself. And she was up there in age at that time. I guess she might have been like in her 60s or something. I don't know how old she was, but she must have been up there in age during that time. and the things she had to say, stick your cock up her ass, and this,
Yeah.
you imagine what this seasoned actress, from movies like Giant and things, from old school, to having to say these kind of things, let me fuck you, and good Lord. But she
My,
did it.
my favorite line, my favorite line too, is where she's just like, he's trying to like they're trying to do the exorcism, whatever, and she goes, "The sow is mine."
Well, no, yeah, you keep away. The sow is
Sow is
mine.
mine. Yeah.
And then there's the right after she stabs herself with a cross, and she slaps Ellen Burstyn, punches her or whatever, knocks her to the floor, and that's the first time we see her head turn. Not when that head spinning
360.
around.
Yeah.
And she said, "Do you know what she did, your cunting daughter?"
And it's in that British voice, the Dennings voice. Yeah.
Yeah.
But anyway, like there's a ton of scenes that lead up to this though that I think the scene that like really, I don't know, is like one of the most effective scenes once you get into all the shit is the scene where the detective comes over. So the Dennings guy's been thrown out of the window. He died. The detective comes over. He knows something has happened in that house, but he's not sure like how to prove it. He interviews Ellen Burstyn, and like right as he leaves, after like there's a real like tense scene between the two of them where he knows and she knows that he knows, but like she's trying to keep her shit together. Right as he leaves, like all hell breaks loose up in the room, and like she goes up there and the records are flying around and shit. That's awesome. That's all practical too, by the way.
Yeah.
That's what makes it even more awesome. Like in Poltergeist, they kind of did a scene ripping that off, but it's all a bunch of like visual effects where shit's like flying around and something turns on and all this, like a light bulb turns on.
And then the whole thing with the cross. And can you imagine, this is 19, what was this film? 73, 72, 73?
73, yeah. Well, I guess 72 when they did the...
Can you imagine just the conversation that must have been, that must have gone down with the studios or whatever, that this was going to happen, that this 12-year-old girl was going to stab herself in the crotch with a cross.
What was the rating system like back then? I'm guessing it wasn't nearly as strict.
This is part of the story that always could, like, it didn't confuse me, but I was always kind of amazed by it. So Friedkin put this up to the MPAA or whatever, and I guess because the story was basically that good wins in the end, and a lot of the people on the MPAA were very, very religious, they got back to him and were like, "Oh, we love this movie. Like, we want people to see this movie because."
But
like,
that one line, "Let Jesus fuck you."
Yeah.
Can you just imagine? During 1973.
No, I can't imagine it now. Like they would never.
I think if I could go back in time,
still gets me. I'm not overly religious. I'm kind of agnostic, but that line, just hearing that voice and hearing those words, still just affects me. Just that's coming out of the mouth of a 12-year-old girl.
Yeah.
The one movie though that I would love to go back in time and see on opening night with a crowd would be this movie.
Yes,
because the time frame, 1973. Some of the stuff that stuff that's said in this movie, stuff that's done in this movie.
And that in particular, I keep going back to that one line. But can you imagine?
Well, it was really like
to experience that during that time.
No, it was, but it was the
coming out of a little girl.
Perfect storm of like all that stuff coming together. I mean, people really weren't ready for Friedkin at that time anyway, especially not to make a horror film. I mean, he just came off The French Connection, which kind of like revolutionized action films. And he was just like, he was a crazy, egotistical guy that would do anything to like, see this vision through. And people were not ready for a movie that raw and kind of like, he just filmed everything. Like he showed everything like as it was happening.
Well, then right after she says that, she grabs her head and shoves Ellen Burstyn's head in her crotch. Lick me. My God. Yeah. I mean, I still find that shocking, and it's 2022. I'd imagine in 1973, a little girl shoving her mother's face in her groin and screaming, "Lick me." My goodness.
Yeah, it's pretty.
It's out there quite a bit.
Yeah, that whole sequence like sets the whole. After that anything can happen in this movie. Like that, nothing is sacred, nothing is safe. Like that's the terrifying part of it to me. Is like right after that, like you don't know what the hell's going to happen, really.
Well, and then also earlier in the film, before this sequence, Reagan is on the bed and the bed is shaking violently.
Yeah,
It's not her doing it; the bed's shaking, and then she jumps on the bed. Help me, mother! I'm burning, and she jumps on on Reagan, and the bed's shaking violently. So that's probably the first instance, at least for Ellen Burstyn's character, that this isn't just in my daughter's head. There's something going on here. This because she says that to is it that the officer that comes sees her, or is it one of the doctors he's talking to? He says, well, the mental lesions or whatever can cause violent physical reactions, and he goes, look, I was on the bed too. The bed shook with me on it too. So she realizes that it's everyone is saying it's there's something going on in her head. We have to do another test. There's something it's something mental, and she's can't bring herself to believe that there's something actually going on. There's something supernatural or whatever going on. Starting to believe that.
Then the doctor is actually the one that recommends an exorcist, like a priest, really, and which sets up the whole thing with Father Karras. The ending of the movie, the last 20 minutes, is probably like one of the most iconic final 20 minutes in any film I can think of, like in any genre of film. Like everybody remembers pretty much everything that happens in that ending. With the head rotating around, the levitation scene, the pea soup scene, everything.
The power of Christ compels
you. That's right.
About 18 times it's said.
Yeah. Yep.
And there's the sequence where earlier in the film where there's a hypnotist that hypnotizes Reagan. She's in a chair. She's got her arm up like that. And she, can you hear me, Reagan? Yes, and can I speak to the person that's inside you? I don't want you to do that, because I'm talking to the person inside of Reagan now, and you hear that growl. And she grabs the guy by the crotch, and she's squeezing his balls, and he's on top of her.
That's right.
Or she's on top of him, and he's screaming, and it's like, get her off me. One of the first things she says when she's getting even before she gets the head scan, this doctor shoots a injecting her or something. Lay your fucking hands off me or something like that. She says in Reagan's voice. She don't say it in the demon voice, but she said,
Well, there's actually a version of this movie with Linda Blair's voice. It still exists. Like they play it in documentaries and stuff, and it is kind of ridiculous with her voice.
But I mean, so much like at the end of that movie to unpack. I don't even know really where to begin with it. But like,
well, and that's we're going all around here. But the first time that Karras goes and visits Reagan as the demon, she's strapped to the bed, and she, he's interrogating her. This drawer moves on its own. Did you do that? And
she's like Macho Man.
Mercedes McCambridge's smoke voice, and then she says something in Latin or something. Quad no me yes, or something like that. Say it again, bonjour. Well, he takes out what he says is holy water, but we find out later it's just tap water. And he slings it on her, and it burns. And she starts talking backwards. We find out it's backwards talk. Later, he goes to this guy that has it on tape, and he runs it backwards. And then we hear, he's a priest. I am no one. I am no one. Hear the voices that were backwards. Now we hear them front. But there's that whole bit about, well, the holy water wasn't real, but she reacts as if it is. And later, when he meets Father, Marin, Max von Sydow's character, he says, "Well, the demon's a liar. You know, he'll mix the truth with lies." And I guess that's an example of that him reacting to the holy water that isn't holy water, screaming, "It burns! It burns!" He's trying to throw Jason Miller off actually having the exorcism, I guess, and just saying, well, she needs to go into a mental institution or she needs psychiatric care, you know, because it wasn't actual holy water. And I guess that's the demon kind of throw him off, you know, by reacting as if it actually was, you know. It's been so long since I've read the book. I read the book, but it's been so long. But I want to think that the book actually leans more into it's more of a mental state that she's in than she's actually possessed, even though there is an exorcism. And of course, the movie itself, it's obvious she's possessed. There's a demon in her, you know. You don't spin your head around and levitate off the bed and all that if there's, you know, something, if it's all mental, you know.
No, but there's a great scene in that end sequence too, where the two priests kind of walk outside, and they're getting ready and all that, and you know they're just kind of. He says something to him like, I can't remember what exactly it is. Don't let him get to you, or something to that effect. You know, don't let him get inside your head, something like that. And that whole thing between the two of them is great too, where you got the one that's, you know, and he's trying to, speaking like the mother to try to get into Karras's head and all that, and just all of that.
There's a lot. There's a lot in this movie. This is one of those movies too that you could watch over and over and over and catch new shit each time, really. I think it was the attention to detail about this with Friedkin and just how perfect he made this movie in every way, really. I mean, it's pretty amazing to see, and especially, and I highly recommend that documentary that is on Shudder. Still to this day, this was only 2 years ago, I think, when that movie was made. How much he went into detail about the movie. He's like 85 years old or whatever he is now.
Yeah.
This was total passion project for him, for sure. I don't know if it's his favorite movie that he ever did, but I'd be shocked if it wasn't, because
it's not actually. Sorcerer is his favorite movie they ever did, but I mean, this is like right up there too. You got to think too, though. Like, I mean, he had a run there of about 3 movies that are considered classics in 3 different genres. Like, really, I mean, he was just on fire at one point in time, and I would listen to that dude read the phone book. Like, every interview I've ever seen him
anything
is
that
amazing.
I've seen of him where he's just talking to, you know, an audience or whatever. I love that stuff, and I seek anything I can find with him where he's talking to people and just about making specific movies or just making movies, period.
That's really kind of why I wanted to do this whole series, is just watching him do, like, you know, it got you so interested in the movies, watching him do these Q&As and these interviews with, and he there's a dozen of them on YouTube, and I probably watched all of them at this point. So
that's one thing we haven't talked about much, is his relationship with William Peter Blatty at the time, where they were really in cahoots, very tight. You know, of course, William Peter Blatty also wrote the screenplay, and my understanding, that's where the director's cut, or the version you never saw, came to be, because William Peter Blatty kept bitching about scenes that were cut, you know, that he wanted to be reinstated, you know.
Well, yeah, and I think he wanted a happier ending. Like, he didn't want the idea of, like, the scene that they argued about the most was the scene where Father Karras is, like, possessed, and then he comes back to himself for a second, and then you don't know if, like, he's jumping out the window, you know, as a demon or as a person, or like what the hell is actually going on. And that's the scene that they argued about the most, because he didn't want the ambiguity. But that's kind of, you know, Friedkin's whole thing. He doesn't-
That's his style.
Yeah.
Isn't it? I mean, look at the ending to say, Killer Joe. It's like, well, does he get shot? I hope he does. But
Yeah,
well,
the French
but-
Connection, the same kind of thing.
Yeah.
Does you hear the one shot? It's like that's all throughout his movies.
and then at the very end of what is it, Sorcerer, where you see
Yeah.
that guy walking into
Yeah.
the building and say, okay, is Rorschach going to bite it now? After all that, but you don't know. Um,
Yeah.
And but that's what I like about William Friedkin, that he puts that bit of what's the word? Ambiguity.
Ambiguity. Yeah,
Yeah, I like that. I like that he does that. Some people can find that frustrating, but I actually like that.
One other interesting thing that people don't mention very often is this was The Exorcist was nominated for Best Picture. I think it was the first horror movie up until that point that had ever been nominated. And Friedkin was nominated for Best Director as well. I think it won a couple of awards. Not sure which ones, but it didn't win Best Picture or Best Director.
And I don't know if they had at the time they had a makeup effect, or an
Yeah.
award, because Dick Miller
Seems like sound may have been one, Best
Dick
Sound
Miller.
or something.
Dick Smith.
Yeah.
And do you guys remember, or maybe I'm just because I'm such an old fart, do you remember the Dick Smith makeup kit they used to have in comic books and like Fangoria magazine and such?
I never
think
saw
so,
it. I never
There
saw
was
it.
a Dick, I never got it, I always wanted it, but there was a Dick Miller makeup kit that you could order, to make yourself up as zombies or whatever, But, and there's a great little, it's maybe 30 minutes, maybe a little longer, on Tubi of Dick Smith making up a guy as a vampire, and then he makes him up as like a vampire with like his face skinned or something like that, and he goes through the whole process. That's great, watching Dick Smith.
Yeah,
And
He-
missing a
It'd be
finger on
interesting.
one of his hands, which I looked at that. I said, "Is he missing a finger?" And then I went and watched.
I didn't
some
know that.
interview with him, and it's either
Huh.
left or right hand. He's missing one of his fingers, and I've had some accident he had where he had a finger, severed.
The Dick Smith, though, I mean, the makeup effects and stuff, then it'd be very interesting to see somebody maybe do a documentary. Maybe it's out there. I don't know, because a lot of the materials that's around now, I mean, they didn't have access to stuff like that. He had to pretty much make it, mix all this crap together himself and make it. It's very different than now where you've got all these products and buckets and everything else that they can use. I mean, it's very different back then. So I think that'd be very interesting to see maybe a documentary on his career. He was around forever. He just recently passed away a few years ago.
Just a few years ago, yeah.
Yeah. And we actually knew the guy that ran his website. And I don't know, he was a peculiar character, evidently, Dick Smith was, because we had asked about maybe getting him on for an interview and stuff. And that guy was like, no, you don't want to get him on, trust me.
God,
I don't
wonder
know.
why.
Yeah, I don't know what the details are behind that, but we were like pretty much like, no, you don't trust me. You don't want to get him on.
Well, like I say, that little video I watched with him, he's really easygoing. He seems, seems friendly enough. I mean, but and let me ask you guys something. What do you think is the ultimate story here as far as good versus evil? Because most people, when we're watching this, and I did too, for most of the times I watched it until just recently, I started to have questions about, does good really triumph over evil here? Because the demon isn't expelled by the religious incantations like, the power of Christ compels you. It might be holding the demon off some and hurting it, but it doesn't expel the demon from Reagan. What expels the demon from Reagan is when Karras comes in and finds Marin dead on the bed, and Reagan is laughing at it, chuckling at it, and he grabs her, he's choking her, and says, "Come inside, come in me," meaning the demon. And the demon actually does come into him. You can see him changing, and the demon's actually in him. But there's enough of him in that's still present to force the demon out. And we see a change, it's very subtle, but we can see the demon's in him and then the demon's out. And he throws himself out the window and down those iconic steps to supposedly his death. Although if you watch Exorcist 3, you find out, well, he didn't die. But my question for you guys is, does good really triumph over evil in this film? Or,
Well, I think that there's an interview where Friedkin talks about that too, and he kind of says like, you'll get whatever you want to get out of it. Like if you want to get that good triumphs over evil, you'll get that. If you want to get that evil triumphs over good, you'll get that. It's purposely made to not answer that question. So there's really no answer. Like
to make you ask that question.
Yeah. So I mean, for me, it always seemed like whenever I watched it that it was like good was the one in the end because that Reagan was okay and the Father Karras sacrificed himself and jumped out the window and that was kind of the end of the movie. But you could totally look at it the other way, which is that he killed the demon killed everybody in the film except for the little girl, and so I don't know. Did good really win in that case? Hard
and
to
you
say.
wonder, well, where'd the demon go?
Right. That's what I mean. That's what I wondered, and of course, you kind of find out in Exorcist 3, which I don't know if they said. It's been a while since I've seen Exorcist 3. Did the demon escape? Because I think that Damien Karras died, right?
Wasn't it? Who is that plays Chucky? What's his name?
Oh, Brad Dourif.
Yeah, Brad Dourif.
So he's the physical,
like the serial killer, and wasn't like the spirit of a serial killer gets into Jason Miller once the demon is expelled.
Some crazy shit like that. Yeah.
And I really like Exorcist 3. It's been a long time since I've seen it, but I've always liked it. George C. Scott, his performance in it and all that.
Way better than Exorcist 2.
Oh yeah. There's not much worse than Exorcist 2 though.
Creepshow 3.
Yeah.
Other than that,
The Exorcist 2, like they took one part of The Exorcist, which is the hypnotism scene, and tried to build like an entire movie around it, and it was just and put locusts. I don't know where the hell they got that from, but the locusts and shit was just.
James Earl Jones is the Locust King.
The giant Locust King, yeah. But anyway, The Exorcist, this movie that we're currently talking about, is a classic and an example of exactly what you would think it would be like if Friedkin, like, in that style made whatever you want to call it, a horror film, whatever. To me, it is kind of a horror film. It's also a film about, like, faith, and it's a drama and all kinds of other stuff, too. But it certainly is a classic and one that still, I think, holds up. Even though somebody was mentioning in the chat, and I think this is true, like if younger kids see this movie today, they would probably just laugh all the way through it because they can't, like, show that they're afraid nowadays. Like, you can't have any kind of real emotion. You've got to fucking...
and looking at it, I can see that if you're religious, how you would ultimately see this movie as a good film, because if this evil exists, then that also means that God exists. If something so demonic can also exist, then that also, if you're religious and you believe in God, well, if that exists, that terrible evil force, then God also exists, and as far as looking at it, like Jason Miller's having this crisis of faith in the beginning of the movie and through most of the movie, ultimately, sacrifices himself, in part because I guess a return of faith, good triumphing or whatever, triumphing over evil,
You believe next year, though, is the 50th anniversary of The Exorcist?
No, I don't believe that. These dates and stuff now are just kind of crazy to me.
It's crazy. I'm guessing we'll see like a new remastered 50th anniversary edition or something like that.
Did they put out a 4K version of it?
Not yet. No, that's probably what they're waiting on.
This would be an amazing 4K movie, though.
Like we were saying earlier, the Blu-ray version of this, which me and Jay have the same version, it looks freaking amazing still to this day. It's like a 12-year-old Blu-ray at this point.
And that's the thing with and you had mentioned Wes and asked me about the first version I saw, and I said, oh, it was the original version, you know. I think I've seen it twice, the extended version. It's got some okay scenes. Of course, there's that spider walk, where she's
That was the
walking down
most
the stairs,
infamous one.
Yeah.
People talked about.
But to me, those are two horror movie tropes. Those kind of shots.
Right.
That shot is just too much of a classic kind of a horror movie moment, that doesn't belong in the film, I don't think.
I can't think of an extended cut that I like better than the theatrical.
No,
There's really not any. I mean, there's just not. Like,
it ruins the pacing, the extended cut.
People talk up all these movies, but they're really not that. I don't think there's one I can think of at all that I like better than the theatrical version. Like the producer's cut of Halloween 6, I don't like that. The Nightbreed director's cut, I don't think it's any better.
Dawn of the Dead, how about the
Dawn of the Dead? I don't like that any better. I think it adds a bunch of needless fucking bullshit, which is why you had the theatrical cut, because the shit that gets cut out of these movies is needless bullshit that like drags the story down, slows everything down.
Well, and it's something that William Peter Blatty throughout the years had complained to William Friedkin about what he had cut out of the film. And William Friedkin had this, I don't know what his exact line was. It was really funny. It said, it's like, you're bitching about success. You're bitching about a movie that's people find to be iconic and one of the greatest horror films ever made and one of the greatest movies ever made. What are you bitching about?
He never could get over some of those like scenes that freaking what he did instead of just going with like the way that Blatty wanted it to be, and which would have been the stereotypical, I guess, kind of Hollywood ending at that time. And he just couldn't ever get over it, and that's why you got the version that you never seen. A lot of that stuff is just shit that Blatty wanted him to put back in there. But Friedkin himself says there's no director's cut. That's why it's not called the director's cut, because the director's cut is the theatrical version of the movie. So it's just called a version you've never seen. Because,
Well, actually, on the Blu-ray, I was going to look because I know they didn't call it the version you've never seen. Yeah. It was called the Extended Director's Cut.
Extended Director's Cut.
Oh, yeah.
That's what it says.
So I don't know if Friedkin finally put his blessing on it or what the deal was, but they couldn't call it the version you never seen because people in the past 20 years or so have fucking
seen it. Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I always go back to the theatrical version of this one for sure. For one thing, like it's already a long movie anyway, like it's 2 hours anyhow. So the extended version's like an extra 12 minutes. That's really not needed. And I think they add like some CGI shit in it as well. Is that right? Like the demon.
Yeah, the Pazuzu or the Eileen Dietz kind of face is added like all throughout the movie for no really good reason.
Yeah. So Exorcist though, like it is a franchise at this point. So we've had a couple of sequels, 3 sequels. God damn, it's one of the worst.
Like there was 1 or 2 prequels. It was like they shot at the same time or something like that. There was some sort of controversy about that.
The TV show. I never watched the TV show.
The beginning. Any of them. I think one of them was called Exorcist: The Beginning, and one of them was called what? Exorcist
Dominion.
Dominion, yeah. Both of them are fucking awful. Like the second movie's awful. The third movie is actually really
because we learn early in the movie that Marion had performed an Exorcist before, and so is that supposed to tell his story of his original exorcism?
Yeah, in Africa or something.
Yeah, some horse shit like that. I could never watch them. I tried to get through them. I just could never. I could never get through those movies.
Exorcist 3, though, I like. It's been a while since I've seen it.
Yeah, I do need to check that one out again. It's been a while for me as well.
And when William Peter Blatty directed that, I think, didn't he?
The Exorcist.
Yeah, he did.
Yeah. They're doing a new trilogy of it, I think, in 2023. I think the first one's supposed to come out. Blumhouse is doing it. So what do you guys think of that? Evidently, Ellen Bernstein somehow is coming back. She's almost 90 years old.
Yeah, that'll be great.
I don't know how that's going to work.
I don't know what to think about it. I'm sure it'll be shitty. Like, there's no way that something like that won't be.
What if the demon come after Reagan's granddaughter this time?
and then Reagan has to like suit up and put a chest full of shotgun shells and get a
No, she
12
can't
gauge,
get shotguns. She's got to get a bunch of crucifixes and holy water and
like a
shit.
super soaker full of holy
Super
water.
soaker full of
Yeah.
holy water. There you
That's
go.
what you need. Oh, you can't do that's the thing. Like you can't make a sequel to a movie like The Exorcist, just like Texas Chainsaw, like a lot of those movies we talked about, Jaws, that were so iconic that any sequel just is not. It's going to look like shit. It really is. That's kind of what happened.
Yeah. No, I don't see. I mean, Blumhouse is kind of their thing, getting these franchises and trying to crank out a trilogy here and there. They did that with Halloween. I think eventually they'll do Nightmare on Elm Street as well. But these movies are not great movies. I mean, come on. It's just it's a money making factory over at Blumhouse, pretty much.
Yeah.
Well, you talk about some of the effects in The Exorcist. And of course, one thing we didn't mention is the spitting the pea soup. She spits up on Karras, throws up on him. And if I'm not mistaken, Dick Smith actually rigged a device that would fit over her mouth that was going to spew this stuff. But I don't think William Friedkin ever liked the effect. And so I believe it's actually a superimposed shot. It's what's ultimately used. Now, I could be mistaken about that. But
Now, there's a shot where she's laying on the bed on her side, and you can see it oozing real quickly.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I think they may have used...
Mirren is like, he's got his robe or something like that, and it's covered in that stuff, and he's,
They may
mopping
have
it
used
up.
something like that for that shot.
And the thing I think is still as effective is when they go into a room and they pull her dress or skirt up or whatever, and she's got "Help Me" appearing on her belly.
Oh yeah, I forgot about that shot. Yeah,
and that's really well done. But some of the effects in this, like you said, that was made up at the time, had to sort of invent the effects, in this.
Yeah, I think a lot of people don't really think about that because, I mean, even like day-to-day items, like did Lowe's exist back then for people to go in and so they could even construct some of this shit to be made? I mean, I don't even know. But latex and stuff like that, like I guess that they would have to make that shit themselves, right? How would they even get it back then?
I don't know. Like, I don't know how that worked with like makeup because makeup effects were like that were basically brand new. I don't know if like everybody had the trade secrets. They just made the stuff on their own, or if you actually could send away and get anything like that.
Yeah,
but
I'm kind of interested in that. So
anyway, I think everybody can agree that The Exorcist is a classic. Like, it's like reviewing Jaws. Like, I mean, we've never really reviewed The Exorcist like you said, but I would give it a 10 out of 10. I think that's pretty
yeah, I
easy.
mean, I think another dead giveaway that it's like a really great movie to me now is if it can hold my wife's attention. Like, so she was in there watching it, and she doesn't half pay attention to most of the shit I'm watching. But if I see her eyes on the TV more than on her game on the phone or whatever, I know that there's something to it for sure. Anyway, but yeah, I mean, The Exorcist, easily, it should be in anybody's top 10 of all time horror movies.
Well, like I say, just me personally, I don't really even categorize it as horror, or maybe I do, but I just look at it as a great movie and one of my favorite movies, period, But that's the way I list movies. I mean, Basket Case is on my list of favorite movies along with Shawshank Redemption, so
yeah.
And then The Exorcist and Texas Chainsaw Massacre and Jaws and Sling Blade and whatever. I have this lengthy list of favorite movies, and The Exorcist is on there, and I don't really just have a subcategory of favorite horror films or whatever. I could do that, but man, it's just a really great movie.
Yeah, I mean, I can definitely see that. I mean, I don't really think of Jaws as a horror movie either.
I don't either.
I just see that as a good movie,
Yeah, something about that movie just doesn't classify it as that. But so somebody asked on here though, now that this series is over, like what's next? Nothing. Nothing is next. I don't know what's going to be next, or if anything will be for a while. But yeah, this is the last series of these. I want to take
Well,
a break.
spooky season is coming up, boys. I
We're
mean,
gonna have to figure something out.
we kind of get into high gear in September and October with some of this stuff.
Yeah.
Um,
So I'm
so
sure
I'm
we'll have
sure.
stuff to do. Yeah.
Oh yeah, we'll have plenty of stuff to do. Lots of good stuff coming out. The new Halloween is coming out. Halloween ends. It's going to be the last Halloween, guys.
No, it's
The
not.
very last one.
God damn. She's gonna cut off his head and piss on it. Like, set it on fire. Whatever.
And that's something that I made a post on Dead Pit and got a few people, got a few responses. That's Halloween. I think the first movie is that's on my list of one of my favorite films, but I think it should have stopped there. And I think John Carpenter thought it should have stopped there. You know, he was kind of, you know, not really forced, but into to writing the script for the second one, but he didn't want to. He wanted to make, but in order to make his next film and get funding for that, you know, they wanted a Halloween 2, you know. And that's why Halloween 3, which is on my list, is favorite films. That's why he went that direction, because he wanted to get away from, you know, Michael Myers and that story. But of course, that didn't work out. But I have never seen any of the films after 3. Only thing I have seen is the Halloween from 2019, whatever that was. You know, I did see that, but I've never seen any of the Halloween movies beyond 3, and I have no desire to, because I just do not think Michael Myers is a very interesting franchise character, not like Jason, who's comical. You know, you wait to see how he's going to kill someone. It's funny. It's entertaining. How, you know, the way he works is fun and entertaining.
I think ultimately
Uh,
Jason is what brought Michael Myers back. I think the popularity of those Friday the 13th movies,
Yeah.
if Friday the 13th and Nightmare on Elm Street wasn't around, like this was, what was Halloween 4 was like 88, I think. So that shit was at a peak around that time. So I'm almost positive the Halloween series probably would have ended with 3 had that slasher boom not happened.
well, I've never done, like say, and I've had some people, you know, kind of talking on the side and such. Really, you've never seen Halloween 4? You never seen? Nope, never seen it, and don't want to.
I tell you, honest to God though, Jay, like I'm done with fucking Halloween, Friday the 13th, Nightmare on Elm Street, Texas Chainsaw. They can stick all those franchises up their ass at this point.
Well,
Like
but the Friday, you know, the Nightmare on Elm Street. Now, I think, you know, Freddy Krueger was an interesting ongoing character. You know, that, you know, I wanted to see what was next with Freddy Krueger, and I wanted to see what Jason was doing next. But I could not have cared less, and still can't care less, what Michael Myers does next.
they've tortured me to this point with all these remakes and reboots and reimagining. I really honestly don't give a fuck about any of those characters anymore. Like
I didn't mind
completely
Halloween,
burn out.
the Halloween 2018 movie, the first one, that the Blumhouse one. But man, that Halloween Kills movie, Jay, holy shit. You should almost like just check it out to see how fucking bad it is.
Well,
What's
I probably
even
will
worse,
someday. Like that, I kind of liked the 2018 movie.
I
I
did
said
too, yeah.
2019, but with 2018, I kind of liked it. I liked it because when I heard that they did away with all the other sequels, and because in my mind, I'm like, well, that's what I've done. I've done away with all the other sequels, so I want to see this movie because they've done away with them. You know, they're not, you know, in the franchise anymore, and you know it's supposed
I'll
to be
be-
just a direct sequel to Halloween. So
I'll
okay,
be interested in
now I
seeing
want to see
though,
it.
the Blumhouse Exorcist movies, because
Yeah.
there's not like a central character in the Exorcist movies that you can, that's a surefire, you know, there's going to be a surefire box office smash there, because it'll be interesting to see in 2023 And if they want to do it right, they got to offend some fucking people. Okay. If they want to be old school about it, they've got to go back to some of the source material and fucking kick
Now,
people in the teeth.
that should be easy enough nowadays to offend people. Like,
Yeah.
goddamn.
And it'll be interesting to me to see where they go with it. Are they going to revisit that original story kind of, and it's almost like a long-awaited direct sequel, or what are they going to do?
I don't know. I look forward to watching the first one just so I can probably shit on it because I'm sure it'll be god awful. Now, Matt,
Can you imagine in the era of Me Too and cancel culture and all that, doing something like, lick me and let Jesus fuck you and all that? I mean, they won't come near anything near what they went to in the original film,
I almost
well,
think they
at
have
this-
to do that. I think
this
they have
point-
to.
at this point though, that The Exorcist is going to have like you have to have 25% Native Americans in the movie, 25% like Hispanics. You
gotta
have to like
gotta have a gay character.
you gotta have a gay like it's just so ridiculous what they do now in these movies. It's become a joke to try to watch some of this shit now. So I'm
What was
sure
it in the Star Trek films, the more recent ones, because Sulu is gay, the actor, they turned the character gay in the updates,
God damn it. But see, like that's the thing about Star Trek that was killer. They did that years before that became the thing to do. Like they had the whole diverse cast. They just didn't blow it up your ass like all the time, like telling you what they were doing, like trying to make it this big deal. Fucking nonsense. Anyway,
George Takei,
Phantasmat says, I hope that this series of reviews turns some people on to Sorcerer, To Live and Die in LA, and Cruising the most. That's my hope too. Like at least a couple people will watch those movies.
That's two films that I have seen, but it's been forever. Is To Live and Die in LA and Cruising that I need to find copies of or see. I've been trying to find them on streaming, couldn't find them on streaming.
No, you cannot find To Live and Die in LA on any streaming anything. I know.
I wonder what the deal is with that.
And I really need to see those again because it's been forever since I've seen either one of those movies.
Great movies though, and I mean it's probably been the most fun out of anything because I hadn't seen a lot of those movies, or I hadn't seen them in a long time anyway. Like Cruising, I hadn't seen in forever, and I'd never seen To Live and Die in L.A. Sorcerer, I hadn't seen. It's like going back and watching these movies 20 years later, 15 years later, whatever. It's been like the most rewarding one of these that I've done because I'd seen the Argento and the Fulci movies more recently, but yeah. This has been my favorite of the series. So,
well, even for me, like The Exorcist, this was probably the first time in like 12 years that I'd seen it because I watched the Blu-ray when I first got it, and I haven't. I mean, for some reason, I just haven't watched it in that period of time. So it's all. I think that these type of shows always make it a little interesting, in that a group of friends can go back and rewatch these movies. Like Jay, I think he said he watched it every year, and everybody gets a little something different out of it.
It's one of the films like Jaws that if it's not every year, like maybe at least every other year, I watch The Exorcist. I watch Jaws every year, but there's films that I watch very often, and The Exorcist is definitely one of them. Watched it today, and I think the last time I watched it was actually October of last year. It was when Halloween was starting up. I was like, I got to see The Exorcist. But yeah, I mean, that's a film like Jaws that's all about the characters and about the story and about just everything is a perfect storm that just works perfectly, and you just can't duplicate it. As far as a sequel or remake or anything like that, you just can't do it. It's one of them perfect films like Jaws and some others that it just stands on its own, and you just need to leave it alone.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that.
So if I'm sure the 4K is coming, do they do a 4K of both versions, or I think they're just going to do the theatrical version? That's the only one that I would do.
Yeah, I agree with that. Like, I don't think I would go into that fucking extended stuff again because nobody really remembers any of that stuff. And I mean, the spider walk thing is what the only thing anybody remembers, and I don't think that's a huge addition.
I think
to
you
anything.
could do the theatrical version. The second disc could be all documentaries because there's so many documentaries on the making of, and they're all great. I mean, they're all freaking killer.
Yeah.
So I
But
think
it's been so long since I've seen that extended version. But I remember there's another talk between the two priests that I think it was interesting. I mean, I just thought as a deleted scene, it was interesting to see, but it didn't belong in the movie. It just, like I say, it for me, it just sort of ruined the pacing and just wasn't necessary.
I just feel like that's why they take that stuff out. And the extended versions are just adding in a bunch of needless stuff that just bogs down a movie, and that's what you get into.
The mayor has a good suggestion for a new show: Thursday with Uwe Boll and his cinematic genius.
Yeah, I don't think I would torture my fucking self that much. God. I would love to do a Cronenberg, and this would be a good opportunity for anybody that's not on our Discord. If you're on our Discord, go to it and suggest a name for a Cronenberg show, because I could never figure out, I could never wrap my head around how to do like a title of something to do with Cronenberg. And so if somebody can figure that out,
it would have to be something related to flesh something, or something of the flesh.
Yeah, something.
Because that was, and I haven't seen this new movie. What was it? The Crimes of, what is it?
Crimes of the Future.
Crimes of the Future, where he goes back to the body horror stuff. But yeah, that would be a good one, Cronenberg. I'd like to see some stuff about Cronenberg, because I like
Tarantino Tuesdays, boss.
Tarantino Tuesdays. No, I mean, it's just I like Tarantino's movies, but I don't like them enough to do that.
There's rumors that some of his movies are coming out on 4K next little bit, like The Whole Bloody Affair. That's rumored, but I don't. That's been rumored for like 20 years, so I believe it when they officially announce that shit.
Yeah, me too.
But anyway, that's been brought up. I like that. Cronenberg. Do that. Do the Cronenberg.
I'll do it if somebody can figure out the name for it. So just send me some ideas.
Greetings from Cronenberg.
That's pretty good. I got to give whoever that. Yeah. Greetings from Cronenberg's pretty good.
That's me, buddy. That came from me.
Greetings from Cronenberg. Cronenberg's cronies. Anyway, this is the final show for a while. I want to thank everybody. Thank Jay. I want to thank CK. I want to thank everybody that's been in the chat. Check us out on Deadpit on Patreon and Deadpit on YouTube.
Oh, we got another commentary coming up.
We got another commentary coming up. He's going to tell you all about that right now.
Oh, fuck, boys. The Ebola Syndrome. We're going to make Garrett watch it. And I think it's this coming Friday at 10 p.m. And we're going to make him cry, boys. He's going to cry when he sees all them animals die.
God. I don't know. I've never seen it. If Steve likes it, then chances are it's going to be horrific in some way.
Garrett's still in here. Thanks, boys.
God. So that'll be a real treasure for us to watch that shit. But anyway, so Friday at 10, check that out. Appreciate it, Jay, again, for coming into all these and helping out with the freaking stuff.
Thanks for having me.
I guess have the real deal on.
I guess we can do this, though. You want to do the classic outro here?
Sure. Are you going to click it?
Yeah, I'm going to click it.
Deadpit.com. Give us a thumbs up.
Up your butt.
Like, subscribe. And if you subscribe, here's something else you can do. Once you subscribe, you can click the bell notification, right? And it'll notify you anytime that Dead Pit puts up new shit.
Or don't. I really don't give a if you do or
I
don't.
want you to. I want you to.
I don't care.
Let's keep our community growing here on YouTube.
I don't like it. I don't want you to do nothing.
Listen, they need to do that, pal.
No, don't you dare touch it.
Thumbs up. Subscribe. And click that bell.
For this video officially, it's Old Curly Jaws has a message for you. Go on over to shop.deadpit.com and go look at their Teen Public store right now. You got some new shirts like the Old Curly Jaws official t-shirt, which is brutal and badass. You got the Yummy Gummy shirt with the captain himself on the shirt. You got Uncle Bill's face on a fucking shirt. You got the Final Girl shirt. You got all these shirts over at shop.deadpit.com. Get them before they're all out, especially the new one, Bedtime 1039. It doesn't get better than that, so go on out. Check out these shirts at shop.deadpit.com. Go look at their Team Public store. You're going to have a good old time. Get them all!
Thank you to all of our supporters on Patreon. Dead Pit on Patreon.com is the only place to check out a complete archive of the old Dead Pit radio shows all the way back from 2005 on, in addition to the midweek shows and fan commentaries, exclusive podcasts, and much more. Dead Pit on Patreon.com if you're interested. Tiers start at only $1.